When I first took the night guard position at Hollow Pines Mall, the supervisor handed me a laminated sheet of rules without looking me in the eyes, his hands trembling just enough for me to notice, though his face stayed blank and professional. I thought it was some corporate attempt at humor, a creepy initiation to scare the new guy, but the moment I stepped into that empty mall after closing, the fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead and the echo of my own footsteps stretching unnaturally far down the polished corridors, I realized there was no joke here, not even a bad one, because the rules weren't written like something meant to make you laugh. They were written like something meant to save your life. Rule 1. Never look at the mannequins after midnight. The mall had dozens of them, dressed in every store's latest fashions, but the sheet insisted I avoid eye contact entirely, as if they were capable of looking back. Rule 2. If you hear the escalators running, do not investigate. The sheet didn't specify why, but there was a warning beneath it, in bold, smudged ink, that said, "It will notice you." Rule 3. Between 2 o'clock and 2:15 a.m., stand inside the security office with the door locked and the lights off. No exceptions. Rule 4. If you see a woman in a red dress, do not speak to her, do not follow her, and under no circumstances let her speak to you. Rule 5. At 3:33 a.m., you must walk to the center of the food court and stand still for exactly 3 minutes. Don't look around, don't move, just wait until the clock hits 3:36 before returning to your post. Rule 6. The last store on the west wing, the one with no signage and boarded glass, does not exist. If you find yourself walking past it, turn around immediately and take a different route. Rule 7. Never, under any circumstances, leave through the east exit after 4 a.m., no matter what you hear or see. Rule 8. If the lights go out, count to 30 before turning on your flashlight. If you turn it on too soon, something will see you. They seemed ridiculous until the first night began in earnest. The mall felt wrong after the customers and employees were gone, like it was holding its breath, like something ancient and patient was waiting for me to step somewhere I shouldn't. I made my first rounds in silence, pretending the place was just an empty building, trying not to glance at the mannequins whose glossy faces seemed to be catching the light in ways they hadn't earlier, their heads tilted just slightly more than I remembered. Around 12:05 a.m., the sound of grinding machinery echoed faintly from the escalators on the east side, but I followed Rule 2, forcing myself to walk the opposite way even though my instincts screamed to check it out, the way you can't help but look at a strange shadow in your room at night. By 1:50 a.m., I was back in the security office, heart beating faster than I wanted to admit, and when my watch hit exactly 2 o'clock, I locked the door, turned off the lights, and stood in total darkness. Something moved outside in the hall, slow and deliberate, as if dragging one foot, and the sound circled the office twice before stopping directly at the door, followed by a low creaking like wood under strain, even though the door was metal. When 2:15 came, the sound faded into the distance, leaving me with a heavy silence that made my ears ring. At 3:33, I forced myself into the food court, every step a little harder than the last, the overhead lights flickering dimly. I stood in the center, resisting the urge to look around, but the smell of perfume drifted faintly to my left, unmistakable and floral, and I remembered Rule 4, my skin prickling with cold. The scent grew stronger, almost suffocating, and I heard soft footsteps stop just behind me, but I didn't move, didn't breathe more than necessary, my mind clinging to the seconds ticking by on my watch until 3:36 arrived and the pressure lifted instantly, like something had stepped away. On my way back to the office, I accidentally glanced toward the west wing and saw it, the store that didn't exist, its boarded glass faintly glowing from inside, like a candle flickering just behind the wood, and for one terrible moment, I thought I saw movement through a gap in the boards, something tall and thin shifting just out of sight. I turned away immediately, heart hammering, and made my way to the safer, more populated wing. Even though populated was a lie here, nothing was alive except me and whatever the rules were written for. At 4:07, the east exit alarm blared briefly, the sound loud enough to rattle the glass storefronts, but the second I turned toward it, the alarm cut off mid-note, and in the silence that followed, I heard breathing, slow and steady, coming from that direction. I didn't go near it. The rest of the shift passed in uneasy quiet until the first glow of daylight began to creep through the skylights, the oppressive atmosphere lifting like a heavy blanket being pulled away. I locked the office, handed my keys to the day guard, and forced myself not to ask him about the rules, not to see if he knew, because deep down I realized that in this place, knowledge was dangerous, and survival meant following the list without question, no matter how much it tore at your curiosity. The second night began with a strange heaviness in the air, as if the mall had somehow learned my footsteps and was now waiting for me to return, watching me through every pane of glass and shadowed corner. I told myself I was just tired, but even as I walked the first round, I noticed things out of place. A bench that had been in front of a shoe store was now closer to the escalators. A trash can that had been empty was filled with what looked like crumpled paper covered in smudged ink. And the mannequins in the clothing stores weren't just angled differently, they were closer to the glass, their faces almost pressed against it, as if they had been listening for my approach. Rule 1 stayed carved in my mind, so I kept my eyes low and moved on, though I could feel the weight of their unmoving stares brushing the back of my neck. Around midnight, the escalators began running again, the grinding sound much louder than the night before, echoing so violently through the tiled halls that it felt like it was inside my head, and though every part of me wanted to see if something or someone was on them, I forced my feet to the opposite wing, gripping my flashlight in my pocket without daring to turn it on. At 1:56 a.m., as I neared the security office to prepare for the locked-in blackout period, I passed the West Wing intersection and caught, from the corner of my eye, a faint amber glow behind the boards of the non-existent store, flickering like it was struggling against the wood. I moved faster, locking the office door exactly at 2 o'clock, killing the lights, and waiting in the thick darkness. The footsteps came again, slower this time, as if whoever or whatever it was outside was in no rush. It circled once, twice, 3 times, each rotation slower than the last, until finally it stopped and pressed against the door. I could hear the subtle shift of metal bending under pressure, but it never broke. Just before 2:15, there was a scraping sound across the glass of the nearby storefront, slow enough to feel deliberate, like a fingernail dragging a warning, and then silence. When my watch finally ticked to 2:15, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in minutes. At 3:33, I stood once again in the center of the food court, still as stone, but this time the perfume came almost immediately, stronger, more suffocating, wrapping around me until I thought my lungs might give out. Soft footsteps circled me, slow and careful, and the faintest whisper, too quiet to make out, brushed my ear, but I held my ground, eyes on my watch, even as something tugged lightly at the fabric of my sleeve. At 3:36, the pressure vanished, and I walked back, my steps shaky, but halfway to the office, I noticed the glass ahead reflecting something that wasn't there. A tall, pale figure in a red dress, standing motionless in the middle of the corridor, her head tilted, watching. I didn't look directly at her, didn't acknowledge her presence, just turned and took the long route back, feeling her eyes on me until I was safely behind the office door. At 4:02, the lights in the entire East Wing flickered off and stayed that way. I began counting slowly, every number stretching into the next, but at 28, a voice in the dark, soft, almost familiar, said my name, low and drawn out, coming from just behind my left shoulder. I kept counting, teeth clenched, and when I hit 30, I turned the flashlight on, the beam slicing through empty space. Still, the air felt disturbed, as if something had only just stepped away. For the remaining hour, I stuck close to the central wings, avoiding the glow of the boarded store, but just before my shift ended, I saw something that nearly broke my resolve. A mannequin in the middle of the hallway, not inside a store but standing freely under the skylight, facing me. I had no memory of passing it earlier, no explanation for how it could be there, and though every instinct screamed to destroy it, I walked past with my gaze fixed on the far exit, the rules burning in my mind. When daylight finally returned, the mannequin was gone, the bench and trash can back in place, as if the mall had decided to pretend nothing had happened. But I knew better. These changes weren't random. The mall was watching, adjusting, and the rules were the only thing keeping me from stepping into whatever waited for those who broke them. By the third night, the mall felt less like a building and more like a living thing, its long corridors bending in ways that seemed subtly different from before, like hallways that didn't quite match my memory or shadows that clung to the ceiling a little longer than they should. I could feel the rules pressing heavier in my mind, not as a set of instructions, but as a thin thread between me and whatever waited beyond their boundaries. The smell hit me almost immediately tonight, not the cloying perfume from the 3:33 stillness, but a faint, damp scent, like something that had been trapped in a sealed room for far too long. As I passed the boarded store, I saw it, the light again, but stronger, pushing through the cracks in thin, trembling lines, like a lantern swaying slowly in a place with no wind, and for the first time, I could hear something behind the boards. A slow, deliberate knock, 3 times, evenly spaced. I quickened my pace, refusing to even blink until I had put 3 turns between myself and that section. The first hour passed without incident, though I noticed more benches than usual in the West Wing, all lined perfectly against the glass storefronts, each facing inward toward the mall instead of out to the walkway. At 1:59, I positioned myself outside the security office, but the hallway behind me felt charged, as if static was crawling under my skin. I locked the door at exactly 2 o'clock, killed the lights, and waited. This time, the footsteps didn't circle. They came straight to the door, stopping on the other side, silent for a long moment before something scraped down the metal in one slow stroke, the sound vibrating through the desk and into my teeth. The knock followed. Not on the door, but on the wall beside it, lower, closer to the floor, and then a faint shuffling, as though something was crawling away on all fours. At 3:33, the food court's stillness was worse than before. The perfume returned, suffocating and sharp, but it was accompanied by a soft humming, a tune I didn't recognize, drifting just at the edge of hearing. I stood rigid in the center, forcing my breath shallow, while the sound circled me. It stopped directly behind me, the scent so strong it burned my throat, and I felt something brush against my hair, light, like fingertips or strands of fabric. The seconds dragged, each one an effort not to collapse under the pounding in my chest, and when my watch ticked to 3:36, it all vanished, leaving only silence. As I turned toward the west wing on my final rounds, the east wing lights began their now familiar flicker before cutting out entirely, and I began counting, but before I reached 10, I heard the boards from the sealed store groan, the sound carrying down the hall even from this distance, followed by that same slow knocking. At 19, a whisper joined the dark, not my name this time, but the words "it's open," so faint they could have been imagined. I kept counting, voice trembling, and when 30 finally came, I lit the flashlight, the beam hitting only empty space, but the boards, they looked different now, looser at the edges, as if one more pull would tear them free. I didn't go near them, couldn't. Still, the rest of the patrol felt wrong. The mannequins had moved again, not just closer to the glass but arranged in small groups, all facing toward the same point in the distance, their stiff plastic hands raised slightly, like they were waiting to catch something. Near the jewelry store, I froze. The woman in the red dress was there again, not in reflection but in the open, halfway down the hall, standing perfectly still in the center of the tiled floor, head tilted exactly as before. I passed her without looking, but the sound of her heels clicking began behind me, slow and deliberate, matching my pace. I didn't run. I didn't break stride. I just followed the rules and kept walking until the sound stopped, though the echo of each step seemed to linger in my bones. By the time dawn broke, the mall's hallways looked as ordinary as ever, benches back in place, mannequins returned to their original poses, boards solid and undisturbed. But I knew what I had seen, and worse, I knew that whatever lived here was beginning to push harder against the boundaries of its own rules, testing both of us to see who would break first.